5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the EUVC Lowdown, the show wrapping up the week in European venture. I'm your host, Kathy White. In the headlines this week, London-based Specs Capital has launched a €100 million fund to invest in health tech companies. The health tech fund will invest up to €5 million into tech businesses globally at the seed to Series A stage. The Czech government announced plans to create a €55 million fund of funds to back 3 independent VCs, with €15 million of the fund going to the AI Technology Transfer Fund, a fund focused exclusively on university spin-outs in the field of AI. This is part of the Czech government's bid to create a better environment for the country's AI scientists to commercialise their research. Over in Germany, Hightech Gründerfonds has closed its 4th fund valued at €494 million, offering seed tickets up to €1 million with the ability to invest up to €4 million across all financing rounds. In the Netherlands, QDNL Participations has launched a €15 million early stage quantum fund covering quantum hardware, communications and more. The fund will lead rounds in Dutch startups with tickets up to €1.5 million. In People Moves, the former head of McKinsey in Poland, Victor Namus, is joining Czech VC Orbit Capital as GP. The fund is aiming to fundraise one of Central and Eastern Europe's largest VC funds, aiming to close at over €200 million. The fund will invest in tech scale-ups across the region. And Thibault Serol, who I've probably mispronounced, I apologize in advance, has joined Atomico, the EMEA founder of cloud data platform Snowflake, which IPO'd for just a small amount of money, just $33 billion, started as executive in residence and is now partner for the fund. Today's show is dedicated to IWD, and the theme for International Women's Day is Embrace Equity. Equity isn't just a nice to have, it's a must have. And as they say on the International Women's Day website, a focus on gender equity must be part of every society's DNA. And it's critical to understand the difference between equity and equality. So before we continue, I just want to very quickly describe both of these things. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. The IWD 2023 Embrace Equity campaign theme aims to get the world talking about why equal opportunities aren't enough. People start from different places, so true inclusion and belonging require equitable action. Today's episode, I'd like to welcome Tong Gu, founding partner at Pact, Marieke Gehres, an early stage investor at Earlybird, and Clarisse Lam, an associate at New Alpha Asset Management and a committee member of the WVCE, which brings women active in the European VC ecosystem together in order to effect maximum inclusion and promote positive change. Ladies, thank you all for joining what my husband referred to last night as a femel rather than a manel. Which is normally what kind of happens whenever I see VCs get together for various different events. Now, I wanted to open the conversation, big, broad question, right? Just to get your thoughts about where we are as women in venture capital specifically. So in light of where we are in 2023, what are your thoughts on the wider ecosystem and where women sit in VC?
It's a pretty timely question because the Rose review just came out last week, if I remember correctly. Basically mentioned a few figures that stuck in my head. One is that I think 14% of women are now angel investors, of which 14% are women. And also that right now there's only 1% of funding going into all women-led companies. However, the other day I was at an event and then I saw a more optimistic number, which is that 20% of all the deals that has been raised money last year, but this is a deal number rather than funding number, are all women-led companies from Bullhurst data. So what I see here is I think more and more women team are starting companies. It's still skewed towards later stage, big rounds. That's why the funding gap is still big. But I think the top of the funnel is getting better.
That's good to hear, because we, in a previous episode of The Lowdown, we dug into the Atomico State of European Tech report, right? And one of the big things that popped up in that report was that figure around overall investment going into female-led startups, and it had shrunk down to 1%. And it was even less if you were an all-black team, and it just decreases and decreases and decreases. And it was down on a couple of years ago, so it kind of gave the narrative that we're moving back in time. And also, you know, just to add on the wider global sphere, and please welcome your personal thoughts on this as well, but if I think about what's happened in the last 12 months with everything that's going on in Iran, with Roe versus Wade being pulled back in the States, there's been quite a few very large things that have happened that I'm sure have made many, many women around the world worry, because if it happens in one country, what else is going to happen in others? So when that figure kind of came out, it kind of set, in my mind at least, a bit more of a negative, we're going backwards rather than forwards. Marieke and Clarisse, what are your thoughts in terms of where women are in venture right now?
Maybe adding on the VC perspective, so not only women in startups, but also women in VC. I feel like we've set quite a positive stage in VC for gender diversity in general. So, I mean, many VCs hired many females in the last year, at least in like the lower levels. But I still see quite a big gap of gender diversity in higher levels, right? Still, if you look at German or European VCs, you mostly see females in like analyst associate roles, but not so many in partner roles. And I think that's still a really big gap and a really big problem we need to tackle, also to increase then gender diversity in founding teams.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree with what has just both been said by Tong and Marieke. I feel like I mean, we've all seen the crazy stat of less than 2% of the VC money going to like female-founded companies and less than 1% to all VC founding VC firms. And I think that it has started to be a bit better in the more junior level, coming from on my end, a French perspective. I mean, at the most associate principal role, I feel like there's even more women than there are men sometimes. But definitely once we go up at a more partner level and decision makers, we're definitely not at a 50-50. We're definitely not at 50-50 yet. And I feel like the kind of worsened number that we've seen over the past year has been because of the macro environment. People have just kind of went back to what they felt comfortable investing in, and perhaps there was maybe the feeling and the view that female founders are perceived as a high risk, which is completely an awful stat, but I feel like with the economy kind of going down, people are just trying to be more comfortable in the way they do deals, and less trying to take more risk and rethink the way they currently do investments.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there is something about human nature. When we start to panic and things aren't going in the right way, we do fall back on what we know, because that's safer than pushing forward with what we don't. It's that lovely human fear that protects us in entirely the wrong way, which is not great. Just for the listeners, it'd be really good just to highlight really quickly where each of you are in your journeys in VC. So how long have you been working in venture capital? Again, just to give a bit more of a sense of what you may have seen change or what you want to see change moving forward. Clarisse, when did you start in VC?
I started 2.5 years ago. So I started in September 2020 as a COVID VC at the time. Been here for about 2.5 years now at a firm called New Alpha. We're based in Paris. We invest at a European level and in fintech and insurtech startup that are early stage. Ever since, I've always heard that VC was very, male dominated, and when I started going to a few events, doing my first events in 2021, I remember seeing a lot more female VCs, which was interesting to me. Everything used to be behind Zoom, and when I went to my first event, it was just mainly a lot of females, at least at the junior level. And then when I started to dive deeper, but who are the partners behind the big funds in France, definitely was shocking to me to see how very few women are represented.
Yeah, there's a statistic from last year, which I don't think necessarily is the best statistic, but it's 15% of general partners in European VC are female. But I looked into the survey and I don't think they spoke to absolutely every single firm. So I'm going to take the 15% with a pinch of salt. Marieke, when did you start in VC?
I actually started 1.5 years ago. So I'm working at Earlybird, and we were one of the first European venture capital funds in Europe. So already around since 25 years, always focus on early stage. So we do seed and Series A in basically all over Western Europe. And then, I mean, looking at the last 1.5 years ago, I'm super happy that our team looks pretty diverse in gender diversity. So super excited to work with many females and males, obviously. And also maybe adding to the point of events and stuff like that, there also I feel like I see many females and also males, so quite a nice diversity component, but still, as said before, probably not at the partner levels.
Now, Tong, obviously I know you quite well, so you're a founding partner for Pact, and Pact is all female founding team, right, which is great. When exactly did your journey in VC start?
So I started 6 years ago, started investing in early stage venture capital in the UK. We launched Pact end of last year. We're one of the first fund in the UK with our female partners. I was a computer scientist in Imperial, and then I worked in investment banking for 6 years, and then had my own data analytics company. The point is that all these sectors, industries were all very male dominated. I was always finding myself the only female, almost it was a norm. So it's interesting to actually working with two female partners. We didn't know what it was going to be like in the beginning, but we realized that we're very complementary, and actually we're just as, we're trying to use the gender as an advantage, because women can be more a listener. They could be more receptive of criticism, which means that there's no ego in the room when we chat together. So we're also, it's almost like a self-discovering journey. And just a little bit about Pact. So we invest at early stage, so pre-seed and seed, focus on UK, Europe, specifically in purpose-driven founders have global ambition. And we'll have 3 themes. We call them EUVC. So it's access, betterment, and climate.
I think there's something nice to note here about, again, I know this through working with you and everything, right? But you've instilled so much in the fund's DNA from the beginning around the purpose and around having impact. But I really quickly just like to go on a slight tangent, and then I'm going to bring it back to everyone. But the 3 of you, whilst you were raising the fund, you also all had your babies, which comes with, I'm sure, quite a few challenges. But just tell me a little bit more about that experience, and also the culture of building a new fund in a different way that accommodates for how you also want your lives to run as women, as mothers.
Yeah, so I'll start with the challenges or our experience fundraising while pregnant. So I have 3 partners, 4 kids now. The youngest one is 4 months. The older ones are 2 or just over 2 years old. So we basically had the kids while we're fundraising, as you mentioned. I think in the beginning, we started during COVID time. You asked about the industry change. I think the industry has actually changed quite a lot in the past 2 years, be that people are more talking about the challenge of female or as a mother much more than 2-3 years ago. I don't know if it's something to do with COVID as well, because now people working from home, it make people think about work-life balance. But 2 years ago, we were actually quite thankful that most of our pitches were behind the screen. So we're like, great, people can't see us. People can't really see and don't know we're pregnant. And since COVID finished, and also I think we got very much more confident ourselves, and we've launched, we've done our first close. My partner Reem was pregnant with her second kid, and she was like traveling to New York when she was 8 months pregnant. And we did have a debate, whether she should go, how does it appear in front of other LPs? But essentially, we just said, we're going to own this. If we don't talk about it as a 3 female GP, no one's going to talk about it. Obviously, we still had people having a second look, kind of in shock, seeing a pregnant woman in the room. But I think if you just carry yourself like you're just a normal human being, then it is what it is. I think another challenge we had was quite interesting one. It's more like being female. So we had multiple times when a mostly a mid-aged white male LP, prospective LP would say, so you're 3 female, you must only invest in female. We're like, not really, it's not anywhere in our deck. And one even insisted on saying, well, I'm sure you will because you're all female. And I don't like female founders because everyone investing has failed. So I'm not going to be interested in you guys. So at that point, so like there's nothing to debate. I don't want to be continuing this conversation. I also don't want you as an investor. So it's also a good way to filter people you're really not aligned with. And the last thing you're mentioning about us building the firm as inclusive by design. So really from the beginning, we had to have a flexible working policy so that all three of us can work with the kid while bringing up the fund. So as like having two kids at the same time. So we had, remote working tools. We had a way so everyone touch base in the morning. We then go on to have our day. It's not based on, how much time you work, but really the output. So that's been really helpful from day one. But we're lucky because we're partnering in the fund, so we can design our culture. Many other people don't have that luxury.
Yeah, it's the big shift when you become your own boss.
Yes.
And build everything from the start. Yeah. I love the story of raising a child and raising a fund. I imagine there will be similarities when they're in their toddler phases and above. There was something else that you said, Tong, there about I'm bluntly going to say the guy that sounds like an absolute twat. Sorry. But it is a helpful filter, right? You immediately go, well, we are not aligned. Great, we don't have to work with each other. And you're in a position to do that, like you said, right? You're raising the fund, you're steering the ship and everything. Clarisse, you're both very much still at the beginnings of your careers, a couple of years on. And Clarisse, I think at some point I'm going to have to take you for coffee because I want to know how starting an venture with COVID ran, just in terms of story. But you're more junior. What have your experiences been as a woman in venture and trying to convince someone that may be slightly unconvincible or carry that bias around with them?
I don't think I had any negative experiences before, but still I feel like there are still three main drivers we need to tackle to really master not only diversity but also equity, as this is also the topic today. And I think for me, first is to really change this VC culture to a more open culture. I mean, VC was formed by white males. That's just a fact. So that's the internal culture, I feel like, is really highly influenced by typical masculine traits, right? So self-affirmation, social dominance, traits like that. That does not have to be bad, but I think it's just a fact. And many females maybe don't really feel comfortable with that, or maybe that's just not their natural traits. So therefore, I feel like we really need to open up this culture, then also listen to females, maybe also give them some extra tools that they feel more comfortable in this culture, and that we basically also can change this culture if we don't have a female-owned fund, for example, or a female-led fund as Tong is doing it, but also change the culture with just women coming into the funds from the bottom pretty much. And then the second thing for me is really building up role models. I mean, especially in funds where you mostly have male partners, I think many females just lack those role models where they can see, okay, also if you start from the bottom and maybe have a different background, you can still manage to become a female partner with all the challenges and stuff like that. So I think we should really work on that. And then the third point is, I think it does not help if only the bottom is working for it. So all the females just started in VC. I think we need support from the top pretty much, because otherwise nothing will change. So therefore, I think also we need male partners that want to change something, and that's also not going to listen to people, but also actually act.
I've talked about this a lot. So I, separate to the podcast and separate to my agency and everything, I used to be director of an organization called Geek Girl Meetup UK, which is all about promoting women in tech more generally. And we talked about similar things, right? So it was all about creating female role models, giving those women a platform, literally a stage, because it was all about events, but a stage on which to show their expertise. And then the other thing that we really pushed for was our allies. And, that this is my own personal opinion, so I'm not going to back it up with any stats, but generally speaking, in venture, in my opinion, we're very quick with some funds, bigger funds, I think, to come out and make a statement about something that they're going to do, which is going to improve X, Y, Z. And we see this quite a lot within kind of climate and sustainability, with businesses greenwashing, but then not necessarily actually following up and acting on the thing that they've said they're going to do. And I've seen this happen in terms of trying to boost diversity. And it's not everyone. There are some culprits, and there are some that are actually acting. But I also have a worry that given where the world is right now, and everything that's happening at a macro level, like things like pushing for diversity or even pushing for sustainability can suddenly be the thing that's cut off as a priority with, you know, where the economy is going and everything right now. But you're right, what you're calling for is absolutely what we need. Clarisse, just to bring the same question to you, you know, what's your experience been?
Yes, I was also fortunate enough to have a diverse team, not have someone that's in front of me that's stuck in their opinions and aren't as open-minded. We're a small team of 4, 50-50 women in the women and men in the investing team. So I was fortunate enough not to have someone to kind of have to try to convince to make diversity a topic to have on the table. But yeah, I totally agree. And to touch back on what Marieke just said, we definitely, I think, need to have men on the table. Shouldn't be like an us versus them kind of conversation, because ultimately, it's sad to say, but white male are ultimately still the gatekeepers today in the industry. And in order to have significant change, we need to bring them into the conversation, because otherwise, if it's only perceived as a, you know, sisters investing in sisters kind of thing, it could become like a female problem, but it's not just a female problem, it's a general problem that we need to tackle. And yeah, we definitely, so I'm fortunate to also work with Sophie and Ruth, who are the incredible people behind WVCE, providing a great platform for women. And we had this event at Station F last year in September, and with only 350 women attending, all of them in the venture scene. And it was just incredible because I didn't realize there was as many women in venture, to have all of them in the same place. It was really, really inspiring to see just so many amazing women, female partners, female LPs, just amazing people in the industry to look up to that you don't necessarily have in your own fund, because there's less female GP. So not just mentorship in the own fund, but it's just such a collaborative environment to be able to have female peers in the venture industry to look up to, and to be there and have, I'll say, a female understanding that you might need some time if you don't have it in your own team.
When you hosted the event last year, did you welcome men into the audience as well, or was it strictly ladies only?
It was a single day event. The entire day was just women in venture, but we had an allies drink at the end of the event, and we welcomed men into the event. But this year is going to change. It's going to be a 2-day event, with the first day being all women in venture, because I think we still need this to have this environment and safe place also for women. And the second day will be an event in which men and all kind of investors will be welcomed into.
That's the way to do it. We when I used to run Geek Girl, we did a conference one year, and it's to show how long I've been working in tech. But years ago, when Web Summit switched from being in Dublin and going to Lisbon for the first year, because of their own issues of actually having enough women present at the conference, they offered a free women in tech ticket so that they could boost the number of women coming along. And for our Geek Girl conference, we did a spin on it, and we released a free men in tech ticket so that men could come along to the conference. Again, for that notion of, we want you to be here, we want our allies, we want our ambassadors, just come and chat to women in a space where, just generally speaking, they feel a hell of a lot more safe as well. So on that note, you know, we are recording this podcast, and you know, most of the, well, I actually don't know for certain, I'm being assumptive, but I would assume that we have quite a few male listeners. We do fall into a trap, right? Whenever we talk about big things like that, we tend to put all women into one bracket. We kind of pick out the poor straight white man stereotype and bracket as well, but we all know that it's a hell of a lot more nuanced than that, and there are a lot more individual issues dependent on your ethnicity, your age, your sexuality, your gender, etc. But to loosely speak to men that might be listening, you know, what would your advice be to them in order to open their minds up, or different, you know, tools, things they could look at that help on this notion of equity and working with women in the right way?
I was at a panel the other day, and I heard something really insightful. And being a founder myself as well, in the past when I used to fundraise with my CEO, because I was a COO, the CEO was a guy. Often, the investor would ask the CEO very forward-looking questions, and then would ask me about any sort of downside risk kind of questions. Obvious that's a bias, but at least we're lucky because we had two people in the room, so we could answer both questions. So I think one of the things for male investors, perhaps, women naturally, let's say, less confident and more realistic. So when you ask questions to a female founder, why not ask the first questions as, what do you think your big vision is? Give them an opportunity to actually talk about, give them the stage to talk about it, instead of feeding into that stereotype and then asking a question that you think is more suiting, their personality, and then you actually don't get opportunity to hear the big picture. And then in our own IC at Pact, we always discuss what are our personal biases, because we all coming from different backgrounds, and then as human nature, you inevitably want to make decisions based on what you know. So it doesn't mean that if you know what your biases are, you're bias free, but at least you're aware of it, so you know how to deal with it when you make a decision. That's something we find very useful.
To add to that, to the male listener, I think it's just listen. Just really take time to listen and make space as well for the women out there, because as Tong just said, women are naturally maybe like very forward in the and put themselves out there as much as men do. Could be like imposter syndrome, could be a level of confidence, but I think maybe try to really listen and make space for them to be able to share their thoughts, share their opinions, and just try to slowly push them more into the front stage. I'll say that would be my advice for the male listeners out there.
Maybe also adding on that, and maybe the topic I was already discussing before, this like really masculine traits that we have in the VC ecosystem. I think it would already help if like everyone would rather focus on maybe the other investors instead of him or herself, since I feel like, this job itself is quite a one single person job, right? Usually, not always you work together with other team members. It's not like really a project-based work. So therefore, many people are just focused on themselves, since it's kind of like their job to just work by themselves. And I feel like that's always a bit of a problem in this industry or culture, that people should look also more to the other investors and don't only listen to yourself, but also just listen to the other ones, and then just think about, okay, maybe what could I also change in my own behavior? Should I listen more? Maybe what's my female colleague thinking about? What's her problem? Can I also change something by myself, pretty much?
That's great. Thank you all. On that note, I have to wrap up today's episode. Thank you all for joining. Happy International Women's Day for those that celebrate it, which would be absolutely everyone on the planet ever. Make sure to check out the EUVC newsletter over on eu.vc and follow the European VC on LinkedIn, where we continue the conversation. And if you, listener, want to get involved in the podcast, we're eager to add more voices to the Lowdown community. So do get in touch. And until next week, have a good one.